What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me today. I thought I would take some time to go over a few specific forms of cardio, what the pros are, what the cons are of these forms of cardio, and just give you more insight on cardiovascular training in general because it is important. It is an important part of everybody's routine that they should use to not only help recover from some sorts of exercise, but at the same time, just build longevity so you live longer and you have a more productive, energetic life. So cardiovascular training is important regardless of which type of cardio training you choose. Some cardiovascular training is absolutely necessary just for longevity's sake. So let's go over this real quick. Three forms of cardio that I'm going to talk about today are low intensity steady state, high intensity steady state, and high intensity interval training. Now, there are other types of cardio on top of this, but these are the three main ones that we need to tackle and bring some clarity to so we really get a good handle on what we're doing with our cardiovascular system. So first of all, when I talk about cardiovascular training, I'm referring to anything that builds up the cardiorespiratory system. So I'm talking about the heart, the lungs, the diaphragm, and everything in between there. But those are the main things. You want to have good amount of endurance in the heart, the lungs, and the diaphragm. So let's just get right into it. The first form of cardiovascular training that I want to talk about today is low intensity steady state, often referred to as LISS. LISS cardio has some good pros to it. The main pro is you can do as much as you want. You can do low intensity steady state cardio really as much as you have time for you can do. And the reason for that is the heart rate is relatively low. Low intensity steady state is going to fluctuate right here in between zones 2 and zones 3, and it's going to go up and down, and that's between 60 and 70% of your maximum heart rate. So if you don't know what zones are when I'm referring to cardio, these are the 5 zones that we're referring to. Anything zone 1 is pretty much resting or maybe not doing something but standing. So your heart rate's going to be a little higher standing than it would be laying down. So resting is going to be in a standing position or an active position is what I would say. It's going to be somewhere zone 1 or below. So zone 2 training isn't that high. And for me, everybody's beats per minute are going to be different. That's between 122 and 143 beats per minute, in between 60 and 70%, as I said. So you would, over a long term, stay right in between those two zones. Now the pros for this are you can do as much as you want. It's not going to cause any additional wear and tear on the body. And the cons are only that it just takes more time. So really 40 minutes a day is sort of minimum for this type of cardiovascular training. Now it doesn't necessarily matter how you break that up, but I would always recommend no less than 15 minutes per session because it does take a little bit to get warmed up and to find that zone. Now when doing low intensity steady state, you want to do a movement that's not going to risk muscular failure, because if you experience muscular failure, you have to stop and recover, and that lets your heart rate down. So you'd never choose something that you can't do indefinitely for 40 minutes, like push-ups or pull-ups or squats or something like that. This would be more for either cardio equipment or walking or maybe a light jog, something like that would be good for low intensity steady state. Another pro of low intensity steady state is that it can help you recover from intense exercise by flushing out metabolic byproducts of exercise. So as your muscles get full of lactic acid and other byproducts, it has a way of flushing that out and sort of freshening you up and helping you recover for the next session. It's also not going to interfere with other types of training. So if you're doing hypertrophy training, which is trying to build the size of your muscles, or if you're doing powerlifting, for example, which is high output under high stress, heavy load, you can do this immediately before and immediately after those exercises. So in a way, it's really helpful because you can cram your sessions together so you don't have to come back to the gym multiple times a day. And the reason I'm saying that is because this is going to segue right into the next one. The next one is high intensity steady state cardio. So high intensity steady state cardio is going to be in between zone 4 and zone 5, and you're kind of going to bounce in between zone 4 and zone 5, just like that up here. Now the pros to that are short durations work well. 20, 30 minutes work really well. Sometimes I push it to 45, but not very often. And so you're not required to do 40 minutes a day, and you can get some of the same benefits in a shorter duration. It hits a deep layer of the heart muscle too by keeping the heart elevated for a certain period of time, really working some deep fibers that aren't worked any other way. So all of these methods we need to incorporate somewhat into training. Mental toughness is also a pro of this. To maintain that type of heart rate for an extended period of time, you do really have to dig deep and build character in that process. So it also has some character building qualities of it. The cons are it's easy to overdo. Number one, I mean, if you do that multiple times a week, your system isn't going to recover. Not only your cardiorespiratory system, but also to your cognitive system, your neurological system isn't going to recover, because it does put a lot of stress on your neurons. That being said, it does interfere with other types of training. You would never want to do it immediately before or immediately after any other sort of training, because it's going to zap from that training. So then your body's got to make the decision, like, what am I going to adapt to? Am I going to adapt to the weightlifting I just did, or am I going to adapt to the high intensity steady state? And so what the body does is it chooses neither. It kind of just goes into survival mode, and you really don't get a lot of benefit out of your other training. So you have to do this in a time where you don't have training immediately before or immediately after. So if you're going to do this type of training, it needs to be segmented or blocked off by itself where you're not doing anything else. And that's the only way that it's really beneficial. The third type of cardio is high intensity interval training. In the intervals, as your heart rate goes high from zone 1 to zone 5, and then it's a time duration. And so you would take a rest and let that heart rate come back down. Now, every time your heart rate comes back down, it takes a long time to go back to baseline, 50% or less. And so the interval needs to be short enough to where you don't go to resting. And then every time you go up, your heart rate goes a little higher, and then it doesn't come down quite as low as it did initially. So you can see these peaks and valleys are in an upward moving channel there. Now, the pro to this one specifically is that you can build muscle in high intensity interval training. You can do things like push-ups, pull-ups, squats in fast order, heavy succession, and actually build some muscle in this process, which is a pro. It's very hard to build muscle in high intensity steady state, if not impossible. And let's forget about it. You're not going to build any muscle in low intensity steady state cardio. So short sessions work really well. 20 minutes is a really good high intensity interval session. It really doesn't take more than that. So builds/maintains muscles. Short sessions work well. It also builds mental toughness, just like high intensity steady state cardio, because you do have to dig deep as you get further into the training session. The cons are also it's very easy to overdo, and it causes a lot of wear and tear on the body. Meaning you can't do high intensity steady state cardio or high intensity interval training very often because it takes so much for your body to recover. But specifically, when we're talking about high intensity interval training, I'm talking about joints, tendons, ligaments, cartilage. That kind of stuff doesn't recover if you do that too often. So it's very easy to overdo. So as you can see, there's pros and cons to each of these. And so really the thing to remember is that based upon what you're doing, if you have seasonal training protocol, these types of cardio need to be arranged around your seasonal training protocol. And with that being said, let's just say that you go into a season where you're trying to put on size. If you're trying to put on a lot of size and you're doing a lot of weightlifting or a lot of hypertrophy training, then you would want to stick primarily with low intensity steady state cardio, because this also has a way of assimilating food better, or helping your body assimilate food. So when you eat, you have two options that your body chooses from. It's either going to assimilate or excrete. Assimilate means drive nutrients into your system and using those for your purposes of growth or maintaining homeostasis. Or excrete means just push it out of your body so you don't really use it. Well, if you're trying to build muscle, you want to assimilate as much food as you possibly can. So if building the size of your muscle is your primary goal, you'd want to stick with low intensity steady state cardio. And since this can be done in such close proximity to that training, then you can usually set a training block to where your low intensity steady state is either directly before or directly after your muscle building or hypertrophy training, which is really cool. Your high intensity steady state cardio is very useful if you're trying to improve your endurance, specifically on something like running or biking. And the reason for that is you can run at a speed that keeps you very high up here in your high intensity steady state. And in doing so, it increases your endurance. So if you're training for a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon or what have you, you're going to be able to utilize this for your actual running training. Of course, you can do this with cardio equipment as well. You don't have to be out there running to do it. But this would, high intensity steady state would take away from your muscle building. So if you're trying to build size, the thing that to keep in mind is that high intensity steady state cardio will zap you. So the only way to do that safely is in proximity to your training, you would need to space it pretty far before, pretty far after, like 2 to 4 hours before or after you're lifting weights, so that it doesn't interfere with the weightlifting. High intensity interval training is something that you can also utilize for biking or running or something functional like that as well, by doing a sprint stop method or other styles of training like hill sprints and stuff like that. But again, it does take away. So if your primary motive is to build muscle, I would stay away from high intensity interval training or high intensity steady state training. Now you can build some muscle in high intensity interval training, but you can easily mess that up by doing too much of it or by incorporating high intensity steady state training too often in the same protocol or in the same week, for just by example. So that's a good rundown of the 3 types of cardio, and there are mixes of these 3, but these are the 3 most important ones that I want to talk about. These are the 3 that I use in my arsenal to progressively get in better shape every year, especially as I age here. And these are the 3 main protocols that we use for all of our members and for our coaches here, and they work very well. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that it's easy to overdo high intensity steady state or high intensity interval training. So this is the part of the talk where I have to talk about nutrition, because first and foremost, if you're trying to be a fit person, if you're trying to have longevity, if you have goals to build muscle or to be lean or just to be more functional in the world, nutrition is the key. And it doesn't matter how much training you do. If your nutrition isn't in check, you're just not going to get the results you want, and you're going to end up causing a lot more wear and tear on the body. A good example of that is if I have a 3 to 5 day a week training protocol Monday through Friday. So I'm training on either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday through Friday. I'm training every day. If I had an extra hour on a Saturday or Sunday to train, and the choice is I'm either going to train more on a Saturday or Sunday, or I'm going to prep some meals so that I'm ready for the week. If my diet isn't in check, I'm always going to choose meal prepping over training every single time. It's not even a debate. It's not even something that I have to think about and really weigh out the pros and cons, because there's only pros. And so if in any given week you have some low intensity steady state cardio, you have some high intensity steady state cardio, and you have some high intensity interval training, if you've already checked those boxes, there's no use to come in for an extra workout. It just doesn't make sense if your nutrition isn't in check. So how do you know your nutrition's in check? Well, if you're trying to lose fat, you're going to be in a consistent long-term caloric deficit. And if you're trying to build muscle, you're going to have adequate amino acid profiles in your system daily, which means eating adequate protein. So if at any given time you're trying to lose fat, build muscle, and you're not in a caloric deficit or in a protein surplus, none of this all of a sudden matters. Now, I'm not trying to discourage people from cardiovascular training or any type of training for that matter, because there are benefits independent of diet, but with an advanced protocol, it's so easy to overdo the training to outshadow the nutrition if your nutrition isn't in check. So that's the main thing. You want to have your nutrition in check overall, and if you ever have a choice, if you ever have extra time to come in and train and your nutrition isn't in check, I would recommend using that time to prep some meals for the week, or using that time to log a day just to see what your average consumption is of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and overall calories, to make sure that if you're trying to lose fat, you're in a caloric deficit, to make sure that if you're trying to build muscle, you're in an amino acid surplus or you're eating adequate protein. So that's always the point that I'd like to drive home at the end of any training talk, is the nutrition is the end all be all, and overall adherence to your nutrition dictates your health and longevity long term. So if you have to have the choice, if you have extra time to work out and your nutrition isn't in check, you need to spend that time getting your nutrition in check, making sure that you're set up for the week. So that's generally how that goes. Just for a general synopsis, so 3 forms of cardio are low intensity steady state. That's in between zone 2 and zone 3, right here. High intensity steady state, which is in between zone 4 and zone 5 for an extended duration of time. Or high intensity interval training, which is high heart rate followed by a break, repeated for a certain number of intervals. And the rest to work intervals, that's kind of up to the training that dictates that. Some stuff that's really intense, you don't necessarily need a lot of emphasis on that training. So that all being said, how should your training feel? Well, you should never be on the floor crawling out of the gym, ever, under any circumstances. That's just not something the body can adapt to. If you're collapsed after training, or if it takes you 15 or 20 minutes to recover, you did push it too hard. So unless you're an elite athlete with single-digit body fat as a male or sub 15% body fat as a female with a sizable amount of muscle, then you're not considered elite, and you need to focus more on your nutrition, because that's ultimately how you get there. So that all being said, as always, if you guys have any questions, you can ask those to me and I'll be sure to get those answered for you. But as far as the stuff that I wanted to talk about today, that's all I got. Okay, so for more on all subjects health and fitness, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I would appreciate if you ring the bell for notifications so you're notified when new videos come out, so you can be updated on all the information that I have for you, because this new YouTube life for me is going to be some sort of a resurgence, because I had almost 6,000 subscribers 8 to 10 years ago, and I would like to build those subscribers back up. But also, this is a vehicle for all the information that I give to my members here at the gym, which is a group training based gym. It's not an open gym format. And so if I have a library of videos up for my gym members to come and reference if they have a question about a subject, if they have a question about cardio, what type of cardio they should do, if that cardio should be around their training based upon what that training is, I can always just refer them to these videos so that they can look these up. But the benefit to everybody out there in YouTube land is that you get the benefit of all this information as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.